All right, let's jump right into today's explainer because we are unpacking a really fascinating and honestly kind of painful paradox about achieving our biggest goals. We're talking about human nature, ambition, and the gritty social realities of actually winning. We usually just assume that the people who cheer the loudest for us at the starting line are going to be the exact same ones celebrating with us at the finish line. But as we'll see, human behavior is a whole lot more complicated than that. Today, we're laying out a pretty stark truth about what really happens to our social circles when we actually achieve the things we set out to do.
Which brings us to the big question. Why on earth do people boost you in pursuit but attack you in success? It's a taboo reality, right? This idea that winning socially can somehow feel exactly like losing. I mean, think about it for a second. Have you ever hit a major milestone expecting high fives, but instead you just feel this sudden, weird chill in the air from your peers? It's a massive contradiction. When you're in the trenches grinding away, they are absolutely your biggest fans. But the literal moment you cross the finish line, that support doesn't just fade, it morphs into downright antagonism. Why does the cheering stop the exact second you do the thing everyone was cheering for? Well, it all comes down to this concept called the fragility of support. This defines backing from peers not as some permanent rock-solid thing, but as a highly conditional state that completely fluctuates based on how close you are to actual success. Support is fragile. As long as you're just striving, trying your best, you're on solid ground. But the closer you get to making that ambition a reality, the thinner the ice gets. It's a wild dynamic because it totally forces us to reevaluate what the encouragement from our inner circle actually means.
So let's break this down a bit. Here is part one, the comfort in struggling, and exactly why they cheer for the grind. People absolutely love to cheer you on when you're struggling, and it makes total sense when you look at it. First off, they see themselves in your struggle. When you're sweating, facing setbacks, just trying to climb that mountain, you are incredibly relatable. You're showing visible commitment and discipline, which are traits everyone respects and kind of wishes they had more of. You're ambitious, you're goal-oriented. And here's the key. At this stage, your pursuit is 100% safe for them. They can easily project their own unfulfilled ambitions onto your journey without feeling threatened at all, simply because, well, you haven't won yet. You're just a highly motivated peer fighting the good fight, and it makes them feel good to support that energy. But then the narrative completely shifts. Welcome to part two, the mirror of achievement, and what happens when you reach a higher standard. This comparison right here perfectly illustrates that sudden, jarring pivot in this social dynamic. Look at the stark contrast between side A and side B. On side A, you're in pursuit. You're struggling, you're super relatable, you're trying to grow. Basically, you belong to the group. But then you cross over to side B. You actually reach the goal. Boom. By doing that, you've attained a higher standard than the people around you. Practically overnight, you go from being this relatable peer to becoming a mirror that reflects their own lack of movement. You're suddenly distinct from the group, and that distinction, it is highly uncomfortable for everyone else. So, here is the crucial turning point, the real kicker. You did something that others can do but didn't. That right there is where the cheering completely stops and the resentment sneaks in. Your success is undeniable, literal proof that the goal was always attainable. It completely rips away the excuses of everyone around you. They can't sit there and say it's impossible anymore or that the system is rigged because you, someone exactly like them, just went out and did it. Now, to keep this totally objective, let's look under the hood in part three, the psychology of resentment and those unconscious defense mechanisms. We can actually break this unconscious defense mechanism down step by step. Step one is the trigger. You achieve exactly what they didn't. Step two is the internal reaction. Your success instantly triggers their inner shame and guilt. It forces them to look in the mirror. And then, step three is the outward behavior. They demean your work to protect their ego. By laying it out like this, it becomes so clear that their negative reaction actually has very little to do with you or your actions. It is entirely about them protecting themselves from their own deeply uncomfortable feelings of inadequacy. Let's zoom in on that emotional fallout from step two for a second. By reaching higher standards, you're inadvertently forcing your peers to confront some really heavy internal truths. Suddenly, they are reminded of their own failures. They are confronted with their own laziness. They're forced to face their own lack of commitment. I mean, that is a massive emotional burden for someone to just suddenly carry, all because a friend succeeded. They absolutely did not ask for this emotional reckoning, but your achievement delivered it right to their front door anyway. And here is where human behavior gets truly fascinating, and honestly, a bit insidious. People are almost never going to come out and say, hey, I'm dragging you down because your success makes me feel incredibly lazy. No way. Instead, detractors will consciously or unconsciously attack you. but they'll mask it in the name of your best interests. They disguise it as helpful advice or deep concern. They'll drop lines like, "Are you sure you want all that extra stress?" Or, "I just don't want you to change who you are." It's a really subtle, manipulative way of pulling you right back down to their level, all wrapped up in a nice little bow of friendship and care.
Which brings us to arguably the most hard-hitting takeaway from our source material today. It is easier to diminish others' hard work instead of putting in hard work to become better oneself. This just completely lays bare the human tendency to take the path of absolute least resistance when we're dealing with ego and shame. Doing the actual work to improve yourself, that takes a massive amount of energy, discipline, and vulnerability. But tearing someone else down so you feel a little bit taller, that's easy. It takes literally zero effort. Tragically, it's just the default coping mechanism for a lot of people when they're faced with the success of a peer.
So we've unpacked the mechanics of why that early support vanishes and exactly why resentment takes its place. Knowing what we know now, that a loss of support is usually just a psychological byproduct of your achievement, reflecting their unadjusted shame rather than your actual worth, it leaves us with a really critical decision to make. How are you going to let this reality change the way you pursue your next big goal? Are you going to shrink yourself just to keep the conditional applause of the crowd? Or will you accept the cost of success and just keep climbing? It's definitely something to chew on as you continue to chase down your ambitions. Thanks so much for hanging out with me for this explainer, and hey, keep reaching for those higher standards.